Yep. All right, so my name is Lucy Rusk. I am the sales representative for inside of 270 St. Louis. So that's downtown majority, and sometimes I go down into Arnold areas. But as far as a sales representative, I'm going in and out of accounts, on-premise and off-premise, talking about our beer, promoting our beer, and making sure that that account is drinking our beer to the best that their consumers want. Really just pushing volume and showing what we have to offer. So a little bit about myself. I was not born and raised in St. Louis. I actually was born in England. I lived there until I was 7, then moved to St. Louis, and so I guess I would consider myself slightly raised, but a little bit different. I was always raised around beer. My dad grew up next to Old Speckled Hen, and I grew up sipping his beer my entire life. So a little bit of that kind of in my blood and my history, which I believe is just why I'm very passionate with my job. I love my job. Rob, I'll let you talk about yourself a little bit.
Yeah, my name's Rob. I'm the district manager for the eastern half of Missouri. So basically my job is she does a really good job selling beer. I take credit for it as a manager, and then I get accolades. So it's a pretty sweet gig I've got going here. I'm a big-time home brewer. I like to brew a new beer every 2 or 3 weeks. I'm a certified Saison. I'm going for my advanced in February. I take my beer pretty seriously. My love of beer started with this wonderful light Pilsner called Keystone Light. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It is just a wonderful beverage. It started off with that, but then when I turned 20, I was already 21. I started drinking good beer. I went to school out east, and so Boston Lager was one of my first beers I had and really made me fall in love with beer. And that's kind of how I started learning about beer. And now when I drink Keystone, no offense to our distributors in the room here, it hurts my face a little bit. So I'm excited to hear from Lucy about Sam Adams, kind of introduce you guys for learn more about our company and a lot of these new beers and existing beers that you guys probably haven't had before. I know there are a couple beers I haven't even had tonight, so it's pretty cool.
So we're the Boston Beer Company. That means that we've got a few other brands within that. One of them being Samuel Adams, Angry Orchard, Traveler Beer Company, Twisted Tea, Coney Island. And does anybody know of a new brand that we actually launched not too long ago? Does anybody have any idea? Anyone? Has anyone heard of Truly? Have you guys seen it out yet? So Truly is a spiked and sparkling alcoholic water. It's 5%. It tastes just like a LaCroix. It's 100 calories. It's phenomenal. So if you guys see it out there, we're pushing it right now. It's in the off-premise in grocery stores. And it's a new take on what we're capable of making in the alcoholic beverage industry. We've got different flavors like pomegranate, grapefruit, and lime. So that's something new that we just came out with. As far as the Boston Beer Company, we've got a lot of history. So Jim Cook is our founder. 1984 was the year that he found a recipe and decided to brew it in his kitchen. This recipe is now what we call the Boston Lager. So he brewed it in his kitchen. He got a suitcase, he filled up his beer, and he went out and sold it in Boston. He went door to door to each account and asked for them to try this beer. Now, in the 1980s, we didn't see a lot of craft beer. We saw imports, Heineken, Corona, and then just the mass domestics. So the whole craft beer industry really wasn't a thing yet. So Jim Cook is out, he's selling with his briefcase in hand, and was going to these bars and showing them what this beer is all about and how it's this unique and interesting flavor where we can use hops and malt and create a complex and balanced beer, which is the Boston Lager. Also, so a little known fact, I'm curious if you guys know too, is this recipe that he found. It was his great-great-grandfather, Lewis Cook's. He had a brewery. Do you guys know where that brewery was? Yep. So Big Daddy's in Soulard, that brick building right next to Anheuser-Busch, that is actually where the original Boston Lager was poured. So that's a little fact. It's semi-local, not really, because we started creating it in Boston, what it is today. But it's pretty cool. We actually have got a little mural, and Jim Cook has come to that Big Daddy's and had a beer there. So we've currently got our seasonal rotation going on at Big Daddy's. So as far as our products go, we've got a wide array. Obviously, Boston Lager is our flagship. We also have a IPA series called Rebel IPA. It's also a grapefruit IPA, a double IPA called Rebel Rouser, and we're coming out with a brand new one called Rebel Juiced, which is a mango IPA, all using West Coast hops. So it's got that citrusy aspect. More of the interesting, what people are leaning more towards nowadays is that West Coast hop. With the Samuel Adams, we've got our Nitro series. So you guys will have the chance to try one of our Nitro beers today. It's a take on beer that's similar to a Guinness. You know, you guys see the cans where they have the widget, and you pop it open and the nitrogen pours out. So you guys will get a chance to try one of those today. We have a white ale and a coffee stout. We also have our barrel room collection, which you guys will dive into today, which is something a little bit unique. A lot of people say that Sam Adams doesn't have unique and interesting beers. I say that is BS. We pride ourselves in being able to make kick-ass beers. You know, we always have consistency. We have the best ingredients. Jim Cook goes to Germany, picks out the Hallertau Mittelfrüh, picks out the Technier hops, and he's handpicked these hops just so we can have those. So some of what the beers that you're going to be able to try today is really this an emphasis on the ingredients we get to use, which are really unique and special ingredients, and just kind of the love that we can put into it and how we can diversify what we have. I'll go into a little bit too. Angry Orchard. We've got our crisp. We've got also a cider room collection where we have 750 milliliter bottles of cider that we can ferment in different ways. Where one of them being actually we freeze the apples first and then we ferment them later, which makes it almost a champagne-y type cider. So we're able to kind of mix and interchange how we are able to create some of our products. Traveler Beer Company being shandies. Have you guys ever heard of Traveler Beer Company before? We've got a grapefruit shandy. We've got a seasonal shandy, which is a pumpkin shandy, which then interchanges. And then Coney Island. This is something that's a little bit unique too, is that Coney Island Brewery is actually a brewery in Coney Island. It's this tiny brewery that we went and helped out. You know, they were a struggling brewery. Jim Cook said, "I will help you, and we will help grow this business." And do you guys remember a year ago what kind of alcoholic beverage, I would say, just flew off the shelves? Root beer, exactly. This time last year, root beer was everywhere. You would walk around the corner of a grocery store, walk into a bar, they would have root beer on tap. So we kind of took that and ran with it as far as our Coney Island root beer. We also have an orange cream and soon to be a cherry cream. Twisted tea. Has anyone ever twisted tea here? Take it on a float trip? Yeah, so twisted tea is kind of our little baby. It's actual tea that we've brewed, and we've got multiple flavors. It's kind of one of those float trip, bring it, stick it between your legs when you're driving home from a long day at work. I don't know if that's legal, but the people who drink twisted tea normally do that. So, well, we will dive into our first beer.
We can neither confirm nor deny this accusation.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So we will dive into this first beer. I like to explain my beers kind of a certain way. It's a 5-step process. Appearance, aroma, taste, mouthfeel, and finish. So this is the New World. New World is our barrel-aged collection. So this beer is a Belgian triple. And as you can see, it's got that golden, pale, hazy look to it, similar to a Belgian triple. Now the smells. Oh, it's yuzu? Oh, I'm sorry about that.
I was going to
We
say, I
did.
think this might be yuzu.
You know what? I'll let him take over
Nice.
then. Yep.
Yeah, so Lucy gave me the honor of talking about yuzu. So in terms of a couple beers that you probably have never tasted before, and I will be honest with you, that prior to an hour ago I had not tasted before. I had only read about in our portfolio. We have a limited draft program that we will brew some really special beers. We keg them in only 6 barrels, and you have to special order them to be able to get these. So we're pretty fortunate to be able to get in a pallet of this random grouping of 6 barrels, and this one is called the Yuzu Reserve. So similar to what she was saying, it really is. It does have a nice pale. You can see it's got a slight haze. That's because it's a double wheat ale. So this one comes in at 7.7% alcohol and 20 IBUs. Does everybody here know what IBUs are? So IBUs stands for International Bittering Units. That's essentially a measurement of how bitter is this beer, and 20 is on the pretty low side. If you were to get up to 60, that's where you get into IPAs, and like the 45 to 65 range is IPAs, and then 65 plus is double IPAs. So this one falls at 20. It's not going to be too bitter. It uses Spalter noble hops from Germany. Fun fact about Jim Cook, this is also one of my life goals. He's a knight of the hops. That's a real thing. If I die with that not on my resume, I'll be very frustrated with my life. So he actually did such a big part in growing the noble hop region of Germany. It was extinct. It was just about to go extinct in the 70s because all these yellow fizzy beers were the only ones that were popular, and all these really historic hop farms were switching over to just high bitterness, low flavor and aroma hops. And then he came along and got to a big enough size that he could go over to Germany and start to buy contracts ahead of time for these noble German hops, to the point they were able to grow back to a size that they are now when they started, they were like a very small field, and now they're the size of Rhode Island, which I know on a map that doesn't sound impressive, but when you go from a field to a small state, that's pretty freaking cool. So they knighted him as a knight of the hop hood, which is just the coolest sounding thing in the world. So anyway, back to this beer. I'm very easily distracted, as you can tell. So the yuzu is a Japanese citrus fruit. So when you smell this, to me, it smells like a combination of like a tangerine and a lemon. Do you guys get any other flavors out or any other aromas out of that? Grapefruit, I heard. That's a really good one. There's definitely grapefruit in there. There's no grapefruit in the beer, but that aroma, you guys kind of get that? The yuzu is a really strange fruit, and so it's really cool that we brewed a beer with this. And so when you give it a taste, you get that citrus note, and then it follows 7.7%. You're going to get a very slight warming. And then the finish, you're going to get just a very small touch of bitterness. Those German noble hops have kind of just like a slightly floral, herbal type of finish, taste and aroma to them. And then I just get a light bitterness and a touch of that citrus in the finish. You guys get that at all? I don't sound crazy up here? All right, just a little bit? All right, you guys calm down, okay? Calm down. All right, I think we're going back to Lucy now. Yeah, it's the last 6 barrel in St. Louis right now, so hopefully we brew it again, but this might be the last time we ever taste Yuzu Reserve from Sam Adams, so it's pretty cool. It is a double wheat ale with fruit. Any other questions on Yuzu? Yeah. Yeah, so last year we brewed just about 60 styles of beer. Obviously, a limited amount of those go to package that you see at retail, and a limited amount of them go to draft. But every once in a while, we still like to experiment and do some crazy stuff, and so we'll do something we don't know if it works and keg it, and then we can order it as they show up. Logistically, it gets difficult, but we were fortunate enough to be able to get our hands on some, and so that's kind of just a line of experimental beers. Our brewers like to kind of flex their muscles a little bit. Yeah, actually, our Rebel IPA is my favorite example. It was one of our most successful launches in the past 5 years. This one started as a purely experimental beer in our brewery. The way we do it a lot of times is we brew it for the brewery in Jamaica Plains, which is just outside of Boston, and then we pour it on draft there and ask the drinkers that go on the tour what they think about it. And Rebel IPA was one of the highest rated beers to come out of the brewery, and so they kept brewing it, asking for feedback, and that's ended up obviously being a national launch to where now you can find it in pretty much every store that sells Sam Adams if they have enough of the 6-packs or 12-packs. So it sounds like we got a good spread of casual drinkers. We got some first-time students. We got some hardcore craft beer nerds. So I'm assuming these hardcore craft beer nerds, I'm gonna ask you guys to hold off on shouting out the answer because you'll definitely know it. So does anyone know our highest alcohol beer? It's actually the highest naturally fermented alcohol beer in the world. Does anybody know the name of it? I'm gonna ask those of you who know to hold off just to create suspense, and then I'm gonna be like, okay, you can answer. All right, so who knows the answer? Exactly. So if you want to talk about funky off-the-wall things that Sam Adams does that not a lot of people know about, there's a beer we do called Samuel Adams Utopias. Early on, this is probably about 15, 16 years ago, craft beer started to become a real thing, and there was this arms race of breweries seeing who could create the highest alcohol beer. And Dogfish came to the table with their worldwide stout, which came in right around 16, 17% alcohol. We came in with our triple bock, just a couple points above them. They came with their 120-minute, I don't even know what you call it, 8 million IPA, like quad IPA, whatever you call that beer. It's a fantastic beer. And then we came to the table with Sam Adams Utopias. It is a 27 to 28% alcohol beer. It's released once every 2 years. It retails for $200 for a 24-ounce bottle. It is an American strong ale. It varies from every other year that we brew it, but it is aged in, this most recent addition to the lineup was aged in port wine barrels, whiskey barrels, cognac barrels, and then we used maple syrup to up the alcohol, and we created this strain of yeast called Ninja yeast, which is also another really cool name. And so if you want to show off how good your lab is or how good your brewers are, you show your yeast. And so brewers will tell you every single ingredient in their beer except for their yeast. That is proprietary information. If you were to find this strain of yeast, you would probably be, no one will ever hear from you again. And so we started with a champagne strain of yeast, right? So champagnes usually end up being between 10 and 15%, depending on what type of champagne you're drinking. We then took that and started fermenting beers. And then when the alcohol got to the point where the yeast died out, we would take the very last surviving strains of yeast in that beer, separate it out. Here's our strongest yeast from that batch. Let's brew another with this. Cultivate that yeast, brew another batch of beer. How high can we get that alcohol to go? Who's dying off first? You're done. Who's the strongest from this? And so a lot of people think that the alcohol comes from the barrel aging process. That's actually just for flavor and complexity. That beer, when it goes into the barrel, is at its final ABV of 27 to 28%. It is uncarbonated. It drinks very much like a liquor, but it is really like a taste I've never had before. So when you want to talk about Sam Adams not doing anything cool or funky, or it's like, you know, you just do your 2 or 3 beers, there's a lot of really cool stuff we're doing, including the stuff we're drinking tonight.
I'll tell you a funny story. It's a short story, but I'll tell you something illegal. So that I did. Just letting you know now. So if anybody doesn't want to hear it, you can go. No, good. So we got a bottle of Utopias a couple years ago. Or actually, it was maybe 4 years ago, the last time we got one. We didn't know what to do with it, so we were like, well, I mean, let's auction it off. So we auctioned it off on Facebook. Which I'm sure is totally illegal. I mean, I know it is. No, I don't really have any idea. So we auctioned it off. We obviously didn't like mail it to somebody on a state, so it's really not that big of a deal. But it sold for $232. People were about average, I think, for that year, and that was normal. And 4 years ago, craft beer was a little different than it is now. People would pay that a lot quicker, I think, than they do now, because things are starting to settle just a little now. But I just tell you guys that's kind of amazing. For 20 ounces, was it? Well, 24 ounces. So, check out our cans list.
$1.25 in a gold bottle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is the Yuzu and our Utopias. So this is our barrel room collection. I don't want you guys to have to hold on to your beer, so I'll kind of do my little process. So this is a Flemish red, and as you can tell, it has got that reddish, brownish color to it, similar to that. So one of the most famous Flemish reds is a Rodenbach, if anyone's ever had one of those. The smell that I'm going to get is really along kind of that tart. You can really feel that coming through. Almost a red wine base, a little bit of spice, but a little bit of that fruitiness too. I'm getting some fruits in there. Take a swig. Now that you guys are tasting right there, that's called Cosmic Mother Funk. Has anyone heard of Cosmic Mother Funk? Cosmic Mother Funk is this unique yeast strain that we use that creates this tart and sour taste that you guys are getting in this Stoney Brook Red. We use 50% of this Cosmic Mother Funk, and all of our barrel room collections have a proportion or a percentage of this KMF in this beer, in their beers. This being the most. So I would classify this as a very sour beer. Would you guys agree? What do you guys think? Very nice. So if anyone says that Sam Adams doesn't know how to make a sour beer, tell them that they're wrong. This is an awesome beer. It's probably one of my favorite beers because I do love sour beers. But this mouthfeel, take another. It's very full, similar to the wine aspects. Now, I keep referencing wine because we age these in barrels. Similar to wine. A unique story that we have as far as these barrels that we use for our barrel room collection is they're actually Hungarian oak barrels. They were originally brewed for port, or they use them for port in Italy. Now, Boston Beer Company found these barrels, thought they were very interesting because this port is seeped into the outskirts of these barrels. So a lot of winemakers, they don't want these different, ingredients that have seeped into the oak. We wanted that. So we got these port barrels from Italy, shipped them over to Boston, and these things are about 12 foot tall. And we didn't know what to do with these 12 foot tall. How do you transport 12 foot tall barrels? So we took them all apart, brought them to Boston. Now what do? I don't know. They have no idea how to put these together. So we actually asked I believe they're called Coopers, who are barrel makers, brought them from Italy to Boston and asked, can you please make these for us? So we have no idea what we're doing. So they literally did that. They brought these Italian Coopers. They built these massive barrels that we have in Boston, and we are now able to brew these barrel room collection beers. So that's something a little bit interesting as far as our Cosmic Mother Funk. So this ingredient is very unique to us. It's all these wild yeast strains that we use throughout our brewery and our different beers that we have. Essentially, we're taking, we're getting a paper towel and just wiping everything down, and just chucking it in there. and letting it ferment. And what happens is this tart, crazy concoction is building up. And I actually was talking to somebody, and he let me know that when you open up this barrel, there is something called a SCOBY. Do you guys know what that is?
It's a layer that floats on top that's a permanent culture,
Mm-hmm.
like a thick, viscous mat. It actually looks like shaving cream that just stays there forever.
Or loogie. It's not, yeah, it's not nice.
Yeah, if you saw it, you wouldn't be drinking this.
Yes.
Kombucha.
What would you pair your beer with? I mean, a lot of times you guys are eating right now. You know, what do you want to pair your beer with what you're eating? Something that I like to come up with is, for this one, I believe, like a marinated pork chop. You know, it really accentuates some of that, like that juicy, the fruity notes to where it'll just complement it so well. We talk about, too, at Boston Beer Company, complementing, cutting, and contrasting when we're with our beers. And so this would definitely be a good complement, I believe, with some pork chops. Which one's this again? Stoney Brook Red. Did I ever say that? I hope I did. Stoney Brook Red. It's a 9% ABV. It is 10 IBUs, and it's 50% KMF, which is the Cosmic Motherfunk. Yes. Isn't it a cool name? Yeah? All right. Now I'll talk about New World, as I thought I was holding that earlier on. This is another one of our Barrel Room collection series. Talking about the KMF before, this only has 1%. So you can imagine we're not about to drink a sour beer. This is what we call the Belgian triple. Are you guys familiar with Belgian triples, kind of how it came about with the monks and how they brewed it? Rob, do you want to go into a little bit? Do you know Belgian triple? I know. You know your facts better.
So Belgian triples are actually the Belgians' response to the trend of Pilsners. So right around the time glass became commercialized for beer is when clear beers became popular. Previous to that, people were drinking out of stoneware or wood or vessels or horns. And you couldn't see what you were drinking out of, or you couldn't see what the liquid was, and so you didn't really care. But then all of a sudden, glass became popular right around the same time that Pilsners became popular, and you saw these like clear in the beer world. The word brilliant means like 100% clear, so the clear, brilliant beers became really popular. And then all of a sudden, some of the best-selling beers in the world were these Pilsners. And so the Belgians at the time were known for their doubles, which is a dark beer, which to some people doesn't look quite as attractive in a clear glass. And so they came to the table with a triple. And so they started using pale malts to brew a triple. And this is one of the most deceiving styles of beer, because if you were to hold it up, it looks like just kind of your standard ale, right? Maybe 4 or 5%. Triples range from about 8.5% to about 10.5% alcohol. The Belgians are great at doing that. I went to a Belgian beer dinner once, and I'm not sure what I had for dessert. But it's a pretty cool story, and this is one of my favorite Sam Adams beers, and I think it's a great representation of the style.
Mm-hmm. So we'll go ahead. We'll try it. It's got that golden, that pale color. The smells that I'm getting is something that's maybe a bit unique for our beer. It's more of that fruity tropical fruits that I'm getting. A little bit of hay, kind of like that hay feature to it, and a slight bit of clove. Now, Belgian triples normally are more heavier on that, that clove, that herbal, as to where I believe that ours is a little bit more heavier on the fruity side. So we'll take a sip. I'm still getting those tropical fruits, not as heavy on that clove that I keep referencing, which makes our beer very unique as far as a Belgian triple. That's not very common. to have that kind of flavor come out. And the finish, it's just dry. It's not lingering. It's not very acidic, which is really nice. Do you guys like this Belgian triple? It's a bit more unique than maybe what you're used to. The hops that we have in here, I believe it's not a hop forward beer. So it's Tettnanger, I believe.
Yeah, we only use noble hops in this.
Yeah.
It's coming mainly from the yeast, and so Belgian yeast, they have really crazy flavors. A lot of it has to do with fermentation temperature. And so the combination of the 1% Cosmic Mother Funk, like Lucy was saying, gives a little bit of that fruitiness. And then when you combine that with different varying ranges of fermentation temperature of this really volatile strain of yeast, you get these like really unique kind of like fruity, like Lucy was saying, you got the clove, you got the all these kind of herbaceous smells and tastes. But a lot of it has to do with fermentation temperature, and they really tease it to get this really unique taste out of the beer. And so to be clear, so for those of you who might be new to beer or new to the class, all these flavors, there's none of these ingredients are added. This is pale malt, yeast, and hops. Those are all coming from the yeast profile on this one. Mm-hmm. Did that answer your question? Okay.
And that's where this Cosmic Mother Funk, it's extremely unique to these beers. Like you said, it adds a quality to these beers that maybe this particular style doesn't already have. So yeah, cheers.
Again, if you buy a bottle of that, do not try to drink it on your own.
No.
My friend told me that.
And that was
So before I go into the whole process, let's just take a whiff of this. I'm going to ask you to hold off on tasting it. Just take a smell of that. You guys smell any chai in that maybe? This is not brewed with chai. Yes, it is. It's brewed with a lot of chai. So it's funny because the beer she was just talking about it was a Belgian style triple. This is also a Belgian style, except it's kind of our own take on it. It's a Saison. So it's our Sam Adams Chai Saison. And so a Saison is a traditional farmhouse style ale. And out of all the traditional beer styles, this one is probably the least defined because in Belgium, what they would do when they're brewing Saisons is just find any ingredients in the area, put that into a beer, and that's kind of what happened. But it became more defined as a style when they found the taste profile they liked, and it became a little more specific. And so our Saison doesn't have a lot of those added ingredients, and so the flavor profile you're getting here in the smell is this one comes at right around 6.2%. It's 22 IBUs, so again, moderate to moderate high alcohol with very low bitterness. But the yeast strain is what's controlling a lot of this, along with the addition of chai in, I believe, the secondary. So if you give this one a smell again, you get a pretty aggressive chai note, but the Belgian yeast in a Saison creates almost kind of like a black pepper type of smell. It's really hard to smell black pepper. If you've ever tried it, be careful when you're doing it because that can just result in a terrible evening. But it's got kind of like a black pepper chai smell, and then we give it a taste. The chai and the taste doesn't come through quite as much, and I think that's where I start to get some of those Belgian notes. It's a very highly attenuated beer, which means that the fermentation takes out a lot of the sugar, and so it doesn't have a ton of sweetness. It's got really high carbonation, very little sweetness, and then on the end, it's low bitterness, but you still get a bitter finish because I don't know what you guys think, but when I drink chai, like chai tea, there's definitely a bitter finish to that tea. So usually in beer, the bitterness comes from the hops. In this case, the bitterness is coming from the addition of chai in the secondary fermentation. What do you guys think of this beer? How many have had a beer like this? All right, 2 in the room. I'll take that because this is another one of those ones. Last 6 barrel in St. Louis. First time I've ever been able to try this beer. That's how she got me to show up here tonight. She put in 99% of the work, and then I show up and drink the beer. Again, management. So I'm excited that you guys like this beer, and I'm excited to sit here and drink it. If you can borrow the...
I'm assuming all of you know the most popular nitrogen-based beer. Guinness. So Guinness has mastered that. Whenever you see something on tap, they've got that that special nitro handle. We really wanted to make a group of beers that were to be interesting and unique, but still have that classic taste that Guinness, has obviously dominated. So this time last year is when we launched the 3. We had a Nitro IPA, a Nitro White Ale, and a Nitro Coffee Stout. We originally started with a Nitro White Ale and actually decided that, that's not the route that we want to go. We want to go with this Nitro Coffee Stout because it is freaking awesome. You guys get to try that as well as I do. Thank you. So this beer, I'll kind of talk about it so you guys can get a chance to drink it together. We take a look at it, deep black, typical with a stout, right?
It's a great band name.
And and so it looks just like a Guinness. It's got that frothy head on the top of it, similar. It's a nitro stout. I'm taking a smell. Now, something that's maybe different to what you're used to whenever you're smelling a Guinness is what I'm getting out of this beer is I'm really picking up on some of these chocolatey notes. A little bit more flavorful. I'm getting a little bit of berry too. Sometimes I feel like people associate dark chocolate with like a dark berry. Do you guys feel the same way? Exactly. And I'm getting a little bit, of that coffee, obviously. So let's take a sip. And that's where the coffee comes. I'm really getting the coffee presence there. I'm getting that chocolate and that berry, which is very different than a Guinness. Guinness is fantastic beer. Our beer is a different beer, but it's our take on a coffee stout. So with this beer, we've actually got some interesting facts. So it's a coffee stout. We use 2 beans. They're handpicked by Jim Cook and his team, and he has a reason why he chose these 2 beans. One of them being Sumatra or Indonesian Sumatran. Does anyone have had these coffee beans before? Yeah. So these beans are actually why I'm talking about these chocolatey notes. They're buried in volcanic soil, and so they have this earthy type taste to it, but also bring out this dark chocolatey taste. So that's one of the beans that we incorporated into this beer. Another one of the beans that we use is an Indian Malabar monsoon bean. Anyone had these before? So these beans are cool. So
Not a great band name.
no. But so these beans way back when my good old ancestors from England decided they want coffee from India, they had to go on a ship. I had months traveling from India to Great Britain, and they obviously went through a lot of shit. They were on a ship, and it was rocky. The beans were going back and forth, and it was hot. It was humid. When these beans got to England, they were completely different than when they left India. But they were really interesting because they weren't acidic. They were a completely different texture. Their bodies changed, and the acidity went away. So the reason why Jim picked this bean along with the Indonesian Sumatran beans is because this beer is not an acidic beer. So let's take a sip again. Are you guys getting any acidity or astringency in the end of that? Nothing. It's very smooth. It's velvety. And that's from that bean that we use, this special bean that they obviously don't ship them from India to England anymore. They don't do that. They have a process. You know, they stick it in some big machine and shake them around for a while and put humidity on them. But it's what makes this coffee stout different than what Guinness has got going on. It's clean. It's creamy and velvety without the astringency lingering. So that's a fun fact about that. What do you guys think? It's nice. So this beer is actually, this beer we're launching on draft next month. So we're excited about that. I know in a lot of bars, they are capable of having not just one, but two Nitro handles. And we think this beer is awesome. The time of year is coming around for people to associate, stouts with the winter time. People love coffee, and that's what we're doing. So cheers. Mm-mm. It's 5% ABV, and the IBUs are 17?
7.
7?
It's like super low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's...
That's a